Yeah, I'll react to that, sure.
Top 10 medieval castles.
Greetings, I'm Shad, and I'm a massive castle enthusiast, having made many videos on the topic, from the names of the parts of a castle, what are the types of castle, to more specific videos like what are machicolations, and why do some castle towers have different angles to their roof lines. But I've never made a video going through what I feel are the top 10 castles that I have come across in all my research, so let's get into it. The first castle is Corfe Castle. It's absolutely one of my favorite because it's one of the best examples of a multi-ward castle. So a multi-ward castle is a castle that has multiple wards or baileys. So the ward or bailey is the section of castle that is enclosed by the castle wall. It can sometimes be connected to the keep or enclose the keep entirely. And a multi-ward castle is one that has multiple wards or baileys that you need to travel through to get to the primary fortified section of the castle. Or
so are the size of baileys or wards going to be decided by how, the amount of protection granted by the geography? So you're never going to find a perfect castle location, and so is it basically just to cover the areas that the main castle isn't on? I promise I have a point here. To cover where the main castle isn't on, but where you just want to like put a wall around the areas just so you can bring the castle defenses to the side of a cliff. I hope I made sense right there, because it's
primary fortified residence, the keep. Corfe Castle, on its later and final renovations, had 4 wards or baileys. You needed to travel through 4 to get to the primary keep. It has a beautiful location situated on a very high prominent hill, which nullifies the effectiveness of many siege weapons. It is a basic square keep, but it is also buttressed, and the buttresses add additional stability, but also visual flair. And there are kind of smaller attachments to the primary square keep, giving more room and also visual style. I also love that it has more prominent windows on its upper stories, showing that you can have larger windows in castle design so long as they are high enough up, making it more difficult for any enemies to get access to. Or if the windows are facing the internal sections of a ward or bailey, that means that they're also protected enough to warrant or justify them being present. Corfe Castle is such a beautiful castle, and I wish I could have seen it in its heyday. It was truly an impressive.
I've seen so many comments, not just on my video reactions to videos like these, but how like these are exits for arrows, but they're also these are so you can put the scaffolding in. I think the exits for the arrows are like the vertical slits. And all of these, I could be wrong. Maybe some of them go in, but it just seems like if that was an exit of an arrow, you would have such, like, you would have no range of, no, they have to be scaffolding pokers.
That means that they're also protected enough to warrant or justify them being present. Yep. Corfe Castle is such a beautiful castle, and I wish I could have seen it in its heyday. It was truly an impressive beast of a castle, although the second castle on this list might give it a run for its money, and that is Castle Gaillard. Built by Richard the Lionheart to maintain
nice walls
control over his holdings in Normandy, Chateau Gaillard is such a unique design. Not only does its primary keep have some of the largest machicolations on any castle I have seen, and you know how much I love machicolations, it actually falls into multiple definitions due to its impressive and unique design. It is not only a linked castle, meaning that its primary keep is actually linked to the outer wall, it is also a concentric castle, having an outer wall entirely encircling an inner wall which forms a bailey around another bailey. It is also a multi-ward castle, meaning it has multiple wards and baileys as well.
Guys, question. See this right here? That part? Is that just the... I'm going to pull up whiteboard right here. Just it's already up, okay? Is that... So you see this area right here? Is that just the remnants of what's left over? So let me do this, okay? So the wall of a castle, like it's like that, and then like that, okay? And then I had always thought like it's just like brick, 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 but it seems to be brick, and then like a lot of just like filled with mortar. So like you line this with bricks, and then you line this side with bricks. And then in the middle is just like, you just like put a bunch of mortar and rocks and stuff. And then that is what this is, right? So, because it looks so, right? You know what I mean?
Outer wall, it is also a concentric castle, having an outer wall entirely encircling an inner wall, which forms a bailey around another bailey. It is also a multi-ward castle, meaning it has multiple wards and baileys as well. This castle is amazing and also a bit insane in its design. Not only do you have to go through multiple wards or baileys to get to the primary inner section, that being 3, the first ward or bailey could be considered a separate castle entirely, because it's fully separated from the rest of the castle, and you need to access the rest of the castle via a bridge. This first bailey can actually be classified as a towered castle. Its keeps and internal structures being formed by towers that are connected via a wall. But
I'm pausing a lot, I know that, but I have questions, all right? So this is what I mean. So you get to the castle site, and it's on this like plateau here, which is what 1, 2, and 3 are sitting on top of. And then you go to a corner of it that is like really surrounded by the steepest parts, and that's where you build the main part. And then you make 1 or 2 baileys, mottes, whatever, that cover the rest of the plateau, so that an army can't, you know, amass on here and then attack.
A bridge. Right? This first bailey can actually be classified as a towered castle. Its keeps and internal structures being formed by towers that are connected via a wall. But this first bailey isn't a castle on its own. It is a primary access point to the larger one, making it an additional ward or bailey to the overall castle design. Chateau Gaillard really is one of the most unique and impressive castle designs I've ever seen. Next is the Krak Chevalier, the most epic Crusader castle. It is truly immense, one of the largest castles on this list. It's technically a concentric castle, meaning a castle within a castle, where it has a wall entirely encircling a inner wall, and the inner walls or castle of the Krak Chevalier is large enough. This thing is massive. It's also very distinctive of Crusader castles, which were all built more flat and squat to the type of castles that you find in Europe, primarily due to the fact that wood was a resource that was much harder to find. To have additional levels in their towers and keeps meant that they had to have fully vaulted ceilings to have additional floors going up, which is a difficult process. It results in a very sturdy castle, but it takes a lot of time to build these types of structures, and so Crusader castles usually had 2 at most levels in their towers and keeps. They might have gotten away with a 3rd here and there. Of course, in its heyday, the Krak Chevalier was riddled with machicolations and battlements. The primary access to the castle is via a bridge. It's on a very prominent hill outlooking this area, and by the way, fortifications were built in this location for a very long time going back. They were just added to and renovated over the years, resulting in the final state of the Krak Chevalier, which was this epic and amazing Crusader castle. Next, we have
So lumber was that hard to come by that even when building a castle where you'd think it'd be a kind of priority for having the lumber, I mean, of course you need it to burn fires, and I guess you need it for, you know, whatever you're using it in war. I don't know if it's catapults, but you'd think that getting enough lumber for one floor wouldn't be that. Clearly, there's a reason. I don't know why. Clearly, it's in a very deserty area. Never mind.
Hochosterwits. Sorry about the pronunciation. I'm not good with the German pronunciation, but Hochosterwits Castle is amazing. It has 14 gates or gatehouses that you need to travel through up this incredible location to reach the primary keep. What's really unique about Hochosterwits is that the keep itself isn't necessarily such a unique castle. If you were to take away the walls, it would actually look like a type of fortified manor house. The keep doesn't actually have many battlements, but it doesn't necessarily need them because it's surrounded by battlements and fortified towers. It would be so difficult to reach the central keep of this castle. Also, look at the height of this hill. It is so defensible and would be insanely difficult to besiege because it would basically be impossible to get siege engines close enough, especially through all the layers of defense. Hochosterwits really demonstrates in one of the most extreme ways the philosophy behind castle defense, and that is layering the defense. Force the enemy to go through defensive barrier after defensive barrier. It is probably the most warded, multi-warded castle I have ever seen. Next we have the Chateau de Pierrefonds. This is probably the most iconic representation of late French-style castle design. This style of castle was one
The French knew what they were doing, huh? Wow, that's impressive.
of late French-style castle design. This style of castle was one of the more primary inspirations of the classic fairy tale style castles that we see often depicted in Disney films, or indeed just the Disney castle. It wasn't the only primary inspiration, Castle Neuschwanstein being another primary inspiration, but Neuschwanstein isn't actually a true fortified castle. Pierrefonds most certainly is.
Wow.
Because don't be fooled by its fairy tale kind of design. This is a very dangerous castle when it comes to defenses. You might be thinking it has fewer crenellations, but that's only because the first line of crenellations actually has a roof line attached to them. See the matriculated battlements on the walls and the towers? Those squares you see are functionally identical to the crenelles on classic crenellations. But instead of being exposed, they have a roof line which actually leads to a second battlement line on the towers and walls. This castle literally has double battlements on its walls and towers, but just designed in such a visually amazing and beautiful way. Chateau de Pierrefonds represents almost the pinnacle of fortified functional castle design, reaching its climax in both its defensive capacity and...
It just looks so chunky. I love it.
It's
like it's a sexy castle.
Visual grandeur. The next castle I have a lot of trouble pronouncing. It is Castle Ewloe, I think. But although I have a lot of trouble pronouncing this castle, I have admired it for a very long time. And you might be wondering...
Right, so this is a perfect example of what I was trying to do. And so what you see here, is this just what was the inside and all of the outer bricks fell off?
But although I have a lot of trouble pronouncing this castle, I have admired it for a very long time. And you might be wondering why I'm including it. There's not much left in regards to its ruin, but when you see what this castle was like when it stood strong, there's actually a lot to love about this.
I just said meh about a castle. I'm so disappointed in myself.
Ruin. But when you see what this castle was like when it stood strong, there's actually a lot to love about this castle. First, it is vastly more representative of castles of the period.
Jeez, look, it's like a house with a suit of armor on.
These larger, imposing castles that I've shown on the list so far are actually more the exception in terms of castle size than representing the norm. They're certainly on the list because of how impressive and incredible they are, being so large and fortified, but only the richest of the rich, usually kings themselves, are able to build such castles. For the castles of the more common lord, Castle Ewloe, again, bad pronunciation, as I said, is vastly more representative.
Ewloe.
The primary keep usually having enough space inside for a single room, maybe two. But even with how small it is still an enclosed castle, meaning the keep is enclosed by a full wall, as well as being a multi-ward castle on top of it. It's also rather unique for having a very distinct fortified tower that is separate to the primary fortified living quarters, this being a fortified donjon, fortified tower, and a fortified keep. This is more commonly found in Germanic-style castles, yet we have a perfect example in this Welsh castle. I just love it for its simplicity, but also how it is more representative of castle sizes of the period.
So are those where the floor would be? What are those?
But yet still you...
But then that window would be at like knee height, so that wouldn't really make sense.
Unique for its design and its layout. Next is Chateau de Puilaurens, and if you thought my German pronunciation was bad, well...
It's Puilaurens. I don't know.
Here's my French.
Chateau de Pierrefonds.
What I love about Puilaurens is location. One of the first and primary things to consider when you're building a castle is location. The greatest defensive advantage you can give a castle,
just like houses,
is where you put it. And just look at Puilaurens' location. It is incredible. It is epic. It would almost be impossible to besiege just by virtue of its location, let alone...
So the big knockback. So castles aren't designed to make you last forever, right? Obviously, it's just a castle is a place where you can hold out against an enemy while you hopefully wait for aid, right? Hopefully. So 2 big things. 3 big things. I guess 2. I'm going to count food and water as 1. No, 3 big things. 1 is food. You need to have a large stockpile of food, of non-perishable food. So like grains and stuff. I guess you could keep some animals. 2, more importantly, is water, which I guess if you had a well, but I mean, you're not digging a well inside of granite, you know? So how do you get water? And then 3, and maybe most importantly, is how do you get help? So I feel like if you're being besieged by someone, it'd be really important to have some secret way for 1 or 2 people to be able to sneak out and then go get help. And I wonder if there are any really cool, innovative ways that they allowed that.
It's having battlements and defensive towers on top of it. I am just in awe of this location, but that is also representative of this philosophy. It's not the only type of castle that has such an insane and amazing location like this. Indeed, if you look up the Corfe castles, many of them have similarly impressive locations like this. Puilaurens is just my favorite among them, and it's on the list because of its representation of such an important philosophy in castle design. Location, location, location. Next we have Hermitage Castle, a semi-ruined castle in the borders of Scotland, and one of the reasons why it's on this list is it is such a beautiful example of the unwalled castle.
Yeah, it seems like such an awful location, though.
There's been a misconception that I've worked hard to debunk, and it's the idea that a castle has to have a wall around it. This is so historically inaccurate. Not at all. There were many castles throughout history that did not have a wall around them, and they were just a single fortified building. And Hermitage Castle is a perfect example of this, as well as being an example of a type of tower house. Also, instead of just having a kind of single square footprint, it is more diverse and unique in the shape of its footprint, giving it a more distinct look. It also has a very interesting aspect to it, where historically we presume that it had an attached hoarding built around it, giving it higher defensive functional ability. This would give defenders a platform to be able to shoot down on anyone that is hugging the line of the wall beneath. Usually castles of this period would just have stone-built machicolations which would achieve the same purpose, but instead it actually has functionally useless but visual types of smaller machicolations that are just there for aesthetics that are running along the top line of the castle. The designers choosing to go with classic hoardings instead of stone machicolations, but still liking the visual style of those machicolations and adding in smaller aesthetic ones. That's just a very interesting element that makes me like the castle even more.
Okay, I'm about to say something that I think might even piss me off, but okay. I mean, never mind. I mean, if they didn't have cannons, then... But I mean, 1 cannonball... Okay, never mind.
That's just a very interesting element that makes me like the castle even more. Next is Karlstejn, and oh my goodness, I love this castle. Located in the Czech Republic, it is very representative of the Germanic kind of style of castles that were very prominent within the entire Germanic regions. One of the more distinctive features of this style is that its uppermost floor of the towers are actually made out of wood with a very high-angled roof. But not only high-angled, it actually has 2 angles on the roof line.
Beautiful.
Why are they built like that? Well, I have a dedicated video explaining, but it gives such a unique look that I personally love. love. In addition to its unique visual flair, look at its size. It is incredible, imposing, impressive. It actually has 2 keeps and, of course, a defensive fortified wall around it with buildings and towers attached to that outer wall. The medieval Germanic architectural style is often overlooked in kind of castle designs in modern media such as fantasy and things like that, which I feel is a true shame because I love this design style. And Castle Karlstejn is one of the most impressive and beautiful representations of it. And finally, last on the list, we have Bodiam Castle, one of my all-time favorite. It is a beautiful representation of a towered castle, meaning a castle that is formed by its outer wall and all buildings and...
Where did the fairy tale or the idea of alligators inside of a moat come from? Like, is that just like from like a kid's book? Just like, oh, imagine if alligators, because I mean, when you think of castles, you think of Germany, France, UK, or at least I do, I guess, and not exactly alligator, crocodile-friendly climate. But I mean, I guess in other areas you could, like if you had like a Egyptian castle or something.
Castle, meaning a castle,
or, you know, Middle East,
that is formed by its outer wall, and all buildings and rooms are actually built as sections or attachments to that wall. It's basically a castle that...
Wait, where's this one on the list? Was this on the list? This looks awesome.
Built as sections or attachments to that wall. It's basically a castle that is a wall and towers, hence the towered castle. But Bodiam is particularly beautiful when you look at the silhouette from the approach of its front entrance. It has variety in its towers. The primary gatehouse also functions as the most prominent tower as well, meaning that the tower that you would most clearly define as the keep is also the gatehouse. It is surrounded by such an amazing water-filled moat, giving prominence to the castle and making it very distinctive. It also represents a bit of a transitional period in castles, where they started to focus more on the livability and comfort on castle, but not wanting to throw away or give less emphasis on the importance of its defensive ability as...
I wonder if they would like stock it with fish or something. Just to, like, have as a food source or like for leisure.
A military structure. And so we see a kind of combination of its defensive ability as a military structure. And so we see a kind of combination between those two philosophies in Bodiam. One of the signs of this is the sheer amount of internal fireplaces it has to try and give greater warmth and comfort to as many rooms as possible inside of it. I love the variety and creativity with the machicolations and battlements on the primary gatehouse. And as I mentioned, the silhouette is one of the most beautiful of any castle I have seen. And there we go. These are my top 10 castles. And this is actually a very difficult list to make because there are so many castles that I love and are particularly unique. So if you like this video, perhaps I'll be able to make another one for you. Thank you very much for watching. I hope you've enjoyed. And of course, I hope to see you here on the next video on Shadiversity.
Thanks, Shad. This is a really cool video. Probably had some stupid questions. If you guys can answer any of my questions or just any of your comments in general, I'd love to see down in the comment section. And I'll see you guys next time. Bye, guys. Stop giving me those freaking... Hey, great video. Have you returned on your investment? I just did crypto. And then there are like 30 comments of I did crypto. Stop it. What is... All right, bye, guys.